Today's video is all about how to use Kendra's Card Challenge 21, the printable, the process, and even assembling a few of the cards together. Hey, it's Beth. Welcome. Today I am going to walk you through how to cut the papers using Kendra's Card Challenge 21, and then we'll kind of assemble a couple of the trickier card sketches with you. This is just part of a new kind of educational series that Cards by Kendra is including in her challenge. So myself and LV Handcrafted, who's Lynn, and then Kendra are all kind of doing more instructional videos, like showing you more of the cutting and kind of overall assembly. And then we still have the design team who is showing you like individual card sketches as well. So hopefully with all of these elements put together, it should make using Kendra's Card Challenge a whole lot easier and less intimidating. Maybe I know there are a lot of people who kind of get intimidated just by the fact that you're taking 6 sheets of 6x6 pattern paper and then using the sketches that are included in the challenge and turning those papers into 15 cards. So when you look at it, some people kind of get a little overwhelmed when you look at it all together. So we're hoping to ease some of that. So just to start off, when you get the PDF, which there will be a link to Cards by Kendra in the description box below, and she tells you more about how you can get the challenge PDF if you don't already have it. But it's basically, you can go to cardsbykendra.com and sign up for a free Patreon account and download the PDF for free, the current challenge PDF. Beyond that, any of the past challenges are archived and they are only available to like paid Patreon members. So that's something to keep in mind if you are looking to go back and do prior challenges. But on the front page here of the PDF, you've got some codes that if you want to participate in any of the giveaway opportunities, you can submit photos of the full set of 15 cards one time per month. And so each month has its own QR code. You can scan the code and it'll take you to that page where you can upload your photo set for that month. Just some other additional information. You've got the supplies that you're going to need. Basically, you need 6 pattern papers that are 6x6 size, 15 A2 size card bases. And then if you want to do, a lot of times you'll need some additional cardstock matting layers or, other pattern paper. You just need some matting layers of some kind, and then any sentiments and embellishments that you would like to include. So next you have 6 cutting guides, and they are labeled A through F, and that coordinates with 6 sheets of pattern paper. And then those pattern papers then can be used to create the 15 cards that have sketches here at the back. Each sketch has individual measurements. So if you only want to make one, if you want to kind of just test out the waters and you only make one card or a couple cards at a time, you can do so because each sketch has the measurement of all the pieces on there, of the pattern paper pieces as well as the matting layers. So you can do one card at a time if that's what you would like to do as well. There's some instructions here, which we always recommend you read, not only for the challenge and how to, use the PDF, but also for if you want to enter into any of the giveaway opportunities. There's a Facebook group that is included on here as well, like the information is included. And then if you have questions, that's a great place to ask. There's a lot of people who, work through the challenge, so somebody should have an answer for you. There's also additional card inspiration. People submit photos there as well. So, trying to figure out, I think the only other thing I really want to point out is when you're looking at each individual sketch, there are gray, black, or white, like darker gray, black, or white areas on the sketches, and a lot of times they will not have a letter on it. So like this half circle paper A, that means it comes from the sheet A that you cut down, the 6x6 sheet. This paper E is a strip you cut down from the E paper from the cutting guide. If there are no letters on the other pieces, that means it's kind of your choice. You can use additional pattern paper, you can substitute with cardstock, vellum, whatever it is that you choose that will work best for your card. So pretty much all the sketches have that, and you'll kind of see how I use that whenever I get to assembly. Then on this last page, we have the prize sponsors that donate prizes for the giveaways. If you are interested in membership to support Cards by Kendra, the member levels and the benefits are back here on the back as well. And then one of the things that I'm going to kind of touch on is choosing papers for the challenge. If you work best that way, there is actually a chart back here that for each of the cards, it tells you which papers are included on the cards. So you can actually use this if you want to coordinate papers. For me, I'm usually using a pad or a collection of some sort, and so the papers tend to coordinate anyway. Not always, but the pads I've tended to use kind of all coordinate together anyway, so I don't necessarily use that very often. I mainly will look at the cutting guides and kind of choose my papers based on the size of the pieces. So on A, B, well, really A and B, most of these pieces are kind of small, so I would want to use more of a smaller print pattern. Now, when you get back here to E and F, these have some larger pieces, so this would work better for maybe some larger patterns that you have. C and D kind of have a little mix of both, so I would probably end up going with maybe I could do a larger pattern here and a smaller pattern for D. But you just kind of want to, my tip is to look at the sizes of the pieces that are being cut, and then, kind of think, well, for these smaller pieces, would you even see whatever image is in that pattern? Would you be able to tell what it is with those smaller pieces? So for example, I am working on the All Smiles pad from the Stamps of Life. This came in the December kit that I received from Stamps of Life. They sponsor Cards by Kendra a lot, so they were kind enough to send me this kit, which is so cute. But I don't have a whole lot left, so I am going to try and use this up. So of the full sheets that I have left, I only have really 6 that I want to use. When I talk about size of pattern, like this polka dot here would really work for any of the cutting guides. But I would probably use it for some of these smaller, like A or B. Same with the hearts. This stripe pattern, I'm kind of leaning towards using it for C, just because there's some bigger pieces and there's some space in the stripes, so you can actually see more of the stripes than you would maybe on A or B, if that's making sense. And then I have a couple of bigger patterns. So when I mean bigger, I mean, you'll be able to tell in one of these larger pieces that this says All Smiles, or you will be able to tell that this is a group of unicorns. Whereas back here on one of these, in one of these strips, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell what maybe what the words say, and you might get part of the unicorn in there and know it's a unicorn, but it still wouldn't be very much. That's kind of one of my tips. My second tip is to use double-sided paper, and this will help you in a couple different ways. Each of the cutting guides does give you arrows that show you the direction that the particular piece will go on the card sketch. So if you are using directional paper, you can't always make it work for every single piece. And so if you are using directional paper, I would suggest using a double-sided paper. So for example, on my unicorns. So here you have a couple pieces where it's actually going to go kind of horizontal, and then sometimes it's going to go vertical. And so these might end up facing, the wrong way. but luckily the back side, I could always turn it over and use the back side anytime that my unicorns are facing the wrong way, and then I still have like a smaller print. Like this particular print is still directional, but my point is if you have a non-directional pattern on the back side, usually the B side is less busy or non-directional, you can work it that way as well. So double-sided paper does come in handy for that. So I think that's kind of, I don't necessarily stress too much about choosing the papers for the sketches. Again, like I said, when I'm using a pad or a collection, they all tend to go together. You can see the colors in these are pretty consistent. You know, a couple of them, this only has purple, this only has red, but it still coordinates because there's red and purple in all the other patterns. So I guess my other suggestion would be maybe choose a mix of kind of not necessarily solid, but more single colored patterns and some multi-colored patterns. And so that way, regardless of what they're matched up with, they should hopefully coordinate. So 3 tips, since I kind of went all over the place. Pay attention to the size of the pattern of your paper and the, I guess, letter you're assigning it into the cutting guide. Go for double-sided paper if you have it. Non-directional paper works best. If you do have directional paper, go back and try to use double-sided if you can, and then try to have a mix of single and multi-colored pieces. Hopefully that made some sense. So these are the 6 sheets that I'm going to work with, and then I'm hoping to pull in, I do have one additional one that I'm going to use the solid side for. I'm hoping to use some of these extra scraps that I have left for some additional like matting and embellishment pieces. So that is my plan, and now we can get to cutting. So the sheets in this paper pad are actually 6.5 by 6. So I have an extra 1/2 inch that I'm going to cut off like at the end. But starting with cutting guide A, I'm going to start on that line that has the little scissor icon, and it's a line that goes all the way through the paper. So once I cut that down, I'm going to focus on that kind of square on the left hand side that's going to have some circles cut out of it. And then I'm going to move to the next piece. And I am lining up my pieces on the right over here in the same order that they are on the cutting guide. And then this will help me in the step, like a next step. And it just helps me keep track of which pieces are which. Now that I've got that bottom section cut, I'm going to move to kind of like that top half. And I'm going to go find another line that goes all the way through the paper horizontally. And so that kind of creates that 1.5 inch strip. And then focusing on the top part, I'm going to do that 3/4 inch strip that's on the very right of the cutting guide first. And it's at this point that I'm going to start trimming off my extra 1/2 inch. I wanted to wait until the end just in case I needed any, like in case another one of my cuts along the way was a little too generous and I needed any of that extra 1/2 inch. Now I'm going to do those other 3/4 inch strips that go horizontally across the cutting guide. And then we'll cut those down into the 2 individual pieces. Now that I have all of my pieces cut and they're in the same order, I'm going to put them into some baggies that are numbered by sketch number. And as I'm starting to put them in, I realize, oh wait, there are 2 circles that I need to cut. So I am looking for a circle die that will fit in that 3 inch square. You can use a die, punch, trace a circle. If you can't do a circle, you could just leave it as square. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the smaller 2.5 inch square piece, and then find a circle die that fits that. And then I cut both circles in half with my trimmer. And now I can use my numbered baggies. I have a bag for each card sketch, and I'm going to put the pieces, I'm going to use the cutting guide to help me put the pieces in the correct numbered bag. So I did that half circle in bag 1, and then I did those pieces for bag 2. Next is bag 3. And then there are 4 pieces at the top there for sketch 4, so they're going in bag 4. And then 7 is the next one. There's a couple strips for my number 7 bag, and you can tell that these are just previously used baggie. I mean, not for food, but baggies that I've previously used for other crafting purposes that I'm just reusing. You could use envelopes, bags, cello bags, folder, whatever it is, as long as you can stay organized, because the biggest tip I can give you with this challenge is to keep yourself organized. Moving on to cutting guide B, again, I start there with the scissor icon, and cut horizontally across my sheet. So I'm going to focus on that top section first and cut those strips according to the cutting guide. And then I'm going to go to the middle section there, and it's like a big 3-inch chunk. And then we'll cut all of those strips. So as you're using the cutting guides, you want to look for, she gives you the scissor icon as a good place to start. And then you want to kind of look for places that go all the way through the sheet, like to kind of help you start with those that go all the way through the sheet. And it kind of gives you a section to work on. Cut that section down, look for the next line that goes all the way through, cut that section down, and then, kind of work through it that way. And, if you mess up cutting a sheet, if you have more sheets like in the pad, or if you have more paper you can use, you can always just start over. There's no shame in that. We've all done that. I have done that so many times. And sometimes I can either just pull in an extra scrap piece to kind of fix that section, or, I'll just pull in a whole nother sheet and start over on that cutting guide. Now that my second sheet is cut, again, I'm going to go through and I'm referencing the cutting guide. I'm not necessarily showing it, but I am referencing the cutting guide for the numbers of each of the pieces so that I can put them in the appropriate baggies. If you have the space and are going to be doing the whole process pretty much start to finish, you could just have piles for each number. I tend to kind of do this in steps, and so it might be a while before I would come back and assemble the cards, and so baggies work for me. For cutting guide C, this is my third sheet. I'm going to start there again with the scissor icon, and I'm not necessarily showing it anymore, but I am again looking for those. Each time I cut down a section, I am looking for those cutting lines that go all the way through and kind of give me new sections to work on. This one goes pretty fast. This particular cutting guide goes a little bit faster because it does have some bigger pieces. So I'm on my last little section here. And on this last piece, I do just need to trim off my extra 1/2 inch that's from the pad. Then we'll add these to the numbered baggies. While I'm doing this, I would like to ask, what is your biggest challenge with Kendra's card challenges? Is it the cutting? Is it the assembly? Is it the staying organized? Is it the getting started? And let me know in the comments below, because that is something that we can address and I can address in some future videos. I'm going to have one more set coming up this month using the KCC 21, like where I'm giving you like the cutting guide and the assembly. And then, you know, KCC 22, we're going to be doing the same thing with the educational videos. So let me know what your biggest challenge is, and that's something that I can work on addressing in my future videos for KCC. So again, we are on our 4th paper already. So this is cutting guide D, and I did start with the scissor icon, and I'm working my way through. This cutting guide does have some more circles in it. And so again, you can use whatever circle cutter you have that will fit those squares. So whether it's a punch or a die or a circle cutting system, or you trace a circle and cut it by hand, or if all else fails, like I said before, if you have another shaped punch, you can do that, or you can just leave it as squares and just cut the squares in half if that's what the guide calls for. Like in guide A, it had us cut some circles in half. So you don't have to have the exact shape, you just work with what you have. So on this one, I actually have punches. So like I think my largest circle punch is 2 1/4 inches, which is what the top circle in guide D calls for. So I had to use dies for the circles in cutting guide A, but now I can switch to punches, which is quicker in most cases. Like this one, it goes pretty quick, but then as the pieces get a little smaller, I realize it's harder to get the pieces in the punch to, like here, I struggle a little bit getting my piece in so that I can cut the full circle. So I finally get it and then able to use the punch. And the punches I'm using, they're EK Success punches, and I have kind of like every 1/4 inch from 2 1/4 down to 3/8, I think. So this one was a struggle, but I wanted to leave it in, one, to let you know that we all struggle, and 2, that it can work. You just have to, sometimes I don't know where my reverse tweezers went. Sometimes I will use those to kind of help me. I can slide those in and help, but they've gone missing. I'm not sure where they are. So this was a little bit more of a struggle than it probably had to be. But again, I left it in because we all struggle with certain things. Like, it's not always a perfect process for everybody. So you're not alone if you have your struggles. Now that I have all of those circles punched, I can put them into their appropriate baggies. And on my bags, I just have, like I said, they're kind of repurposed bags that I've used for other crafting purposes. And then I have a Post-it note, a strip of a Post-it note on there even with the number of the sketch. So you work with what you have. You don't have to have any kind of fancy organization system. You can use, like I said, envelopes. You can use baggies, the cello bags you put cards in. You could use one of those little like Dollar Tree type photo albums with the sleeves that has numbers, you know, whatever works for you. So moving on to cutting guide E. This one has, the next 2 have some bigger pieces, so these will go a whole lot quicker. It's kind of a nice change of pace to have some of the larger pieces after cutting down some of those that had a bunch of little tiny pieces. And, you know, I can appreciate Kendra's challenge in creating these sketches and cutting guides, because you have to have both big and small pieces to create, sketches that use up the entire sheet. So you're always going to have little pieces left over, even if you cut the big ones. And so it's, I love that she has made this a no scrap project for the patterned paper. Now you will have scraps for the cardstock if you bring that in, for all your matting. But for like the 6 sheets that she calls for in the challenge, there are no scraps left over. And I love that. So in order to make that happen, you're going to have little pieces along with the big pieces. So got these last 2 bits here. And then we are on cutting guide F. So again, starting at the scissor icon there at the bottom, I will cut that strip and then cut that little bitty piece. And I will come in and add, like, that piece at the bottom right of the guide F calls for like a little fishtail cut. I will come in and do that at the time of, like, when I'm creating the sketch. But if it calls for like a circle, like a shape that's cut out, especially if it requires a die, I go ahead and do that before I put them in the baggie, just so whenever I sit down to assemble the card, I'm kind of like ready to roll. So we're going to put these last pieces in the bags. And then I am going to assemble a few of the sketches. So I'm going to do sketch 4, which has some smaller pieces. I feel like these tend to be the ones that people struggle with the most. And this is fun, because this one is actually an older sheet load of cards from Call Me Crafty Owl. So every once in a while, Call Me Crafty Owl and Cards by Kendra do a little collaboration where they use one of each other's like former sketches in their current like sheet load or challenge. And so it's just kind of nice to have them work together. So I'm kind of like laying these out before I do anything else, just to kind of get a feel for which side I want to use, since some of the pieces will be kind of next to each other, and then getting the general layout down. And then my next step is to figure out which cardstock I want to use for my mat. I only have a few pieces of the cardstock left, and they're not necessarily full sheets, and so I was trying to see, of what I had left, which one I liked better with these papers. So I'm going with this kind of bright pink, and then I will kind of lay it out again, do a dry fit on the card mat itself. So for spacing, I do try to leave an even border around the outside of all the pieces, but I don't necessarily, it kind of varies on the inner, like the borders kind of on the inside. But I feel like as long as the outside is lined up well, then it kind of still makes the card look cohesive, even if, maybe your spacing on the rest of the pieces are a little off. So I have a die set from the Stamps of Life, and I believe it was Bold Inspirations, and I'm using the stamp that says Sending Happy Thoughts, and I'm making sure that the die I want to use to cut that out, the circle die, I'm kind of using that to space my stamp on my Misty. And I'm using my Misty because this is like it's like a thick font, a bold font, and a larger stamp. And so I want to make sure that I'm able to get it a nice, clean stamp. So then once I get that stamped out, I will take that over to my die cutting machine, which is kind of at a separate station, and cut out that circle. And then I also want a matting piece. So I have a circle that's just a little bit larger than what my sentiment circle is going to be, and I'm trying to figure out what I want to cut that matting piece out of with the scraps that I have left off to the right. So now that that is cut, I can go ahead and work on assembling. So for putting these down, I start in usually the bottom right corner. So the corner, one of the bottom corners that's closest to me. And after I get a dry fit of the spacing, I will go ahead and put that bottommost horizontal strip down. And like I said, I am more focused on having an even border around the outside edge of all the pieces. So I'm going to use some Barely Art glue to adhere this piece down. And then I'm going to work on the next piece. If you are not, I'm fairly okay at eyeballing my spacing. If you struggle with that, you can use a T ruler, or you could use a regular ruler and kind of make some guide marks on your card mat as to where you want the outer edges to be for your pieces. Again, you kind of do you, like however you work best. So now I'm going to turn the card around and again work in that bottom right corner and do the same thing. Line up that bottom strip so that it has that even edge around the top and, or like the, I guess the bottom and the right hand side. And then once I get that one down, I will work on the strip that's right above it. And then I will transition to the bottom left corner. And again, I'm going to take that outermost strip and try and make sure it has an even border around it and that it's lined up on the left side with the strips at the top and on the bottom side with those strips at the bottom. And I will say, like on this sketch, if for some reason your spacing is a little bit off, once you put your big focal point there in the center, it's not super noticeable. So don't get too caught up on, making sure it's spaced exactly correct, if that is something that you struggle with. So now all of my pieces are on. And I have my sentiment there. That's going to be my focal point. So I can put my mat onto the card base. And you could make this sketch go horizontal or vertical. Like the sketch shows it as horizontal, but you could turn it vertically as well if you wanted. If I guess the direction of your pattern papers allow. So now I will put my focal point, the sentiment there. You could use a large embellishment here, an ephemera piece or a stamped image if you wanted. It doesn't have to be a sentiment. And then I have a stash of like punched hearts and stars that I punched from scraps from this pad earlier, either in this process or in my last set. And so I'm just trying to figure out how I can use some of those on this card as well. So I'm going to use two tiny pink hearts on either side of my little sentiment circle. And then I want to use those two bigger blue hearts in the corners, but I'll kind of move those around. After I get these tiny little pink hearts glued on, I realized it kind of made it look like the sentiment has cheeks, some rosy cheeks. As far as embellishing the sketches or the cards, you can do as much or as little as you want. The sketches are kind of like jumping off points, and so you can alter the shape of the focal point. You can add additional embellishments. Again, it's whatever works for you. So this is sketch 4 completed. Next, I'm going to do sketch 7. All of these sketches that I'm doing today are also great ones to do with scrap. So if you don't want to cut into new paper, you could do a lot of these sketches just using scrap pieces that you already have. And this particular sketch is great to use with those branding strips that are on the bottoms of the papers. You know, a lot of times they give you a preview of what's on the other side. So if you are one that saves those, like I do, especially if I'm like working with through a pad or a collection, I'll save those and kind of use those throughout my projects. But if you are someone who saves those, this is a great card that I think you could use those on. So I'm just trying to make sure that my strips, one, that the direction of the pattern is facing up, and two, I don't want to have two light colors next to each other, or I don't want to have two white-based pieces next to each other. And then I'm trying to kind of make it so that it goes in a pattern, like the red, the light purple, the white polka dot with the polka dots, the darker purple, or like red, purple, white, purple, red kind of thing. And then there's a strip in the center that is, it doesn't have a letter associated with it, so that means it can be whatever you want it to be. So I am just bringing in some scrap cardstock, and I am going to add a pre-stamped sentiment onto that just says happy birthday. So I should preface that I have a piece of white cardstock that I cut down to be 4 by 5 1/4. So kind of the normal card mat size that Kendra uses throughout her sketches. And I am just putting all of the strips on there as they were cut from the cutting guide. I haven't made any like angle cuts or haven't done any adjustments to them. I'm just going to glue them down as they are first. And then once they're all glued down, I will cut them like kind of all together. She does kind of tell you that your angle is like about a 1/2 of an inch off of the pieces, like, you know, to give you the angle that she's got on there. So you could trim them all individually. I just find for me it's more consistent if I just put them all on here on this card mat and then trim it all as one piece. So then as we're coming down to these last strips, we will get those on, and then you'll see me start to glue my sentiment on. And then I realize that it's going to get trimmed off, like part of the sentiment will be trimmed off if I glue it on now. So I realize that I do need to wait. So like here I add glue and I glue it on, or I first cut a little fishtail banner and then glue it on and then pull it back up. You could stamp the sentiment directly onto your kind of free choice piece there in the center. I just already had this stamped, and so I decided to go ahead and go with that. So here I'm like, oop, wait, nope, that's going to get cut off. So luckily I tried to scoot it at first and then just took it off. So luckily it hadn't fully adhered well yet. So here I'm just putting the whole piece in my trimmer and trying to cut it so that I'm lining it up so that the guide on my trimmer goes through the bottom corner of each of those strips, like the bottom left corner. And so then you kind of have like a blocky triangle. I had a little bit of overhang there at the top, so I'm going to trim that off. And now I can put my sentiment back on, and I'm going to trim off a little bit on the right hand side. So it's going to hang off of my like strip piece here a little bit. But I wanted the kind of edge of the word birthday to line up a little closer to the right edge of that triangle. So my next step is putting this onto a card mat. So I brought in a piece of black just to kind of help the lighter colors pop. And then the pad had a couple of sheets of images that you could either fussy cut out or use some coordinating dies to cut out, like the unicorns. And so I fussy cut out those, and I'm going to be bringing one of those, or either that or a sticker, in for my embellishment. So I'm going to put this on and then add some adhesive to the back of the mat and glue it all down onto my card base at one time. But first I'm bringing in the stickers. And I thought that it was already trimmed down to be 4 by 5 1/4, but it's actually wider, too wide, and I realized that when I go to put it on. So I pop over to my trimmer, trim off that extra bit, and then re-add some adhesive there on the left, and can get that finally glued down. There are some like little, I don't know, not little starburst, little glimmer type stars that were on the sticker sheet that I decided to go ahead and use up with this little unicorn and to fill some of that black space. Again, you could bring in whatever you wanted over here. She just calls for some dots in the upper left, but you could use whatever. Moving on to my final assembly for today, and this is sketch 11. So this is one that has a lot of moving pieces as well. And what I like to do on these is lay them out and kind of figure out how they're all going to go together, get them in the order that they're going to go in. And then I'm going to bring in some washi tape to help make it one solid piece. So this one, because there is no space in between the individual pieces, I want to make sure that when I glue them all together, then I will have like an even border around the outside of it. So this is a little different than sketch 4 that I did because there were spaces in between. I couldn't necessarily connect them before I glued it down. But this one, because there is no spaces, all of the pieces butt up against each other. I'm going to bring in some washi tape. You could use some mint tape, you could use Scotch tape, whatever kind of tape you have. And I'm going to kind of flip them over to the back side in the order that they're still going to go, and then use a little bit of washi tape just to hold the adjacent pieces together. You don't have to do this. I just find like this helps me personally. It's easier to work with one large piece. So I'm going to add these smaller pieces down here onto the bottom of the larger piece. And then there's that one last strip that I'm not going to adhere. I'll just wait until I glue the rest of it down. I think it's easier. I mean, it's still going to be easier even without it, like to get the spacing right because of those other pieces that are at the bottom. So I'm just making sure that it fits and kind of getting eyeball my spacing. I needed to scoot that one piece over just a hair. And so now it fits a little bit better. And now that it's one larger piece, I can come in and add my normal adhesive. And then add this onto my card mat. So normally whenever I work on assembling my cards, I do the cutting, put all those pieces of the pattern paper, put all those pieces in the appropriate baggies. Then I'll come back and look at each individual sketch and cut down all of the matting layers that I need, and then put those pieces in the appropriate numbered bags. And then I will kind of go back through a third time and do any embellishments and sentiments. But for these, since I'm doing these 3 with you, I kind of wanted to just do the whole card, bring in all the matting pieces, figuring out the embellishments and the sentiments kind of all at one time with you. So when you see me do like the last part of this where I'm assembling the other 12 cards, I will already have everything put together in the baggies and ready to go. So I didn't really like the blue maned unicorn with the purple focus on this card. So I had found some other stickers in my stash, some unicorn stickers that I really wanted to use up. And so I am going to bring them in on this card. These are kind of dimensional stickers, so just a little extra fun. These cards are all going to Cards for Cubs, so or most of them will be. So I'm pretty sure that some unicorn loving child is not going to complain that there are going to be some extra stickers on this, because I do decide to go ahead and use 2 larger stickers to kind of create an arch over my sentiment. And then I feel like I need to add a third, you know, because the whole rule of 3. And so I do bring in like a smaller heart one. So then it does become a little busy, but again, I'm sure some unicorn lover that gets this card would be like, ooh, I love it. That's my hope anyway. So I'm adding kind of like the star with the tail. Again, trying to kind of create an arch. I didn't want to use the actual rainbow arch because the colors didn't jive as well. So then trying to figure out where to put that heart, and decide to just kind of go in between the 2 larger stickers. And then this card will be done as well. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, got something out of it. Hopefully it answered some questions or eased some fears that you had about Kendra's card challenges. Our goal for these instructional videos are to help you enjoy the challenges as much as we do. I do hope to have either a part 2 video or maybe some shorts where I'm assembling the other 12 cards, but I did want to touch on the 3 kind of trickiest sketches. I think the ones that have a lot of the smaller pieces that have to work together are the sketches that people tend to struggle with, or maybe just fear a little bit more. So I did want to make sure to at least get those done with you, but then hopefully I will have the rest of my process in some form here on YouTube as well. I want to say a quick thank you to Cards by Kendra for her awesome sketches every quarter, and thank you to Stamps of Life for sponsoring. Please be sure to check out that description box for links to how you can get the PDF, and if you liked the products from Stamps of Life. And then if you would like to support Kendra with a paid membership, there is also a coupon code in the description box that will save you 10% if you just on like your first month, if you just want to try it out, or if you want to go all in and join for a year, you can save 10% on your first year's membership as well. So again, be sure to check that description box. And then if you do have any questions, be sure to let me know those in the comments. But I do thank you all so very much for your time, and hope you all have a very crafty day.